I never thought I'd be fired from a company I helped build, especially after all the sacrifices I made. But what happened next? I ended up sitting in the chair of the man who said I wasn't hungry enough to lead. And he? He was gone, just like that. I'm James Collins. And up until recently, I thought I had it all figured out. I'd been with the company for 7 years. 7 long years of late nights, weekends spent in front of my computer, away from the life I should have been building outside of work. I didn't mind, though, at least not at first. I was building something bigger than myself. I thought I was part of a family, a team. The company wasn't just a place to work. It was my life's project. My manager, the one who hired me in the first place, always praised me for my dedication. He told me I had a future here. He was right, too. Every year I climbed a little higher. Every project I put more of myself into it. I was driven by a quiet ambition, one that told me if I kept working hard, eventually I'd reach the top. But somewhere along the way, things changed. Bradley Smith, our new boss, came in a few months ago. Young, confident, with an aggressive leadership style that felt like a slap to the face after years of steady, slow growth. I tried to respect him. After all, he was brought in to lead the company forward. But something about him rubbed me the wrong way. It wasn't even that he was younger or that he spoke in a way that felt off-putting. It was the way he dismissed the team's hard work, especially mine. I remember sitting in that first meeting with him, thinking maybe I'd be getting the promotion I deserved. Maybe now, finally, I'd be seen for all the extra hours, all the effort I'd put in. But instead, he looked at me with those sharp eyes of his and told me something I never saw coming. "You're not hungry enough to lead this company, James." I was stunned. The words hit harder than I cared to admit. How could he say that? Did he not see all the nights I spent grinding away, making sure things ran smoothly? Wasn't that enough? It was like a punch to the gut. I tried to keep my cool. My hands trembled as I clenched my phone, willing myself not to show how badly his words had stung. I felt the heat rise in my face, but I forced myself to breathe deeply, to steady myself. Bradley didn't even seem to notice my reaction. He kept talking, focusing on his plans for the company, acting like everything was fine. Meanwhile, I could barely hear him. My mind was racing. The next few days felt like a blur. I couldn't stop replaying that moment in my head. Bradley's words, "You're not hungry enough," kept echoing in my mind, growing louder with every passing minute. Why had he said that? What did he even mean? Was it because I didn't make flashy moves or talk about my ambition every chance I got? Was that really what it took to prove yourself? It felt like everything I'd worked for, the late nights, the weekends, the family sacrifices, didn't matter to him. I'd given everything for this company, and now it felt like I was invisible. Was I not enough? The questions swirled in my head, and every time I tried to focus on something else, there they were, sitting like a weight on my chest. The truth was, I didn't know if I could keep doing this. The anger and the frustration were building inside me like a storm ready to burst. And I couldn't talk about it. Sarah, my fiancée, noticed the change in me, but I couldn't find the words to explain it. She'd been patient, understanding, but lately I could feel her pulling away. I'd become consumed by the work, letting the long hours and constant pressure spill over into our time together. When I'd come home late, exhausted, she would always be sitting on the couch, a faint smile on her lips, but her eyes were tired, filled with unspoken questions. She wasn't angry, not really, but there was a distance between us that I couldn't ignore anymore. "James, what's going on?" she asked one night as I sank onto the couch next to her after another 12-hour shift. Her voice was soft, but there was a sharpness to it. A quiet plea for me to see her, to see us for once. I didn't know how to answer her. How could I tell her that I was questioning everything? How could I explain that all my hard work, all my sacrifices, seemed to mean nothing to the one person who mattered the most at that moment? "I'm just busy," I muttered, trying to brush it off, but I knew that was a lie. I wasn't just busy. I was consumed. By the company, by the pressure to be more, to prove myself to Bradley, to prove I could lead. But Sarah deserved more than just a half-hearted response. She deserved more than the exhausted, distracted version of me that I had become. But how could I tell her I was struggling with my self-worth? That Bradley's words had shattered me in ways I didn't know how to fix. I thought I had everything in control, but now everything felt out of reach. I spent the next few days in a haze, my mind never at ease. Work became a blur of meetings, deadlines, and tasks, but nothing held my attention. Every interaction with Bradley felt like an insurmountable wall. Every time I saw him, my stomach would tighten, and that feeling of injustice would rise again. It was like he saw me as just another cog in the machine, someone who didn't have the hunger to climb to the top no matter how much I gave to the company. I had always thought hard work was enough. I believed that loyalty and dedication would be recognized, that eventually people would see the value I brought to the table. But now I wasn't so sure. The turning point came when I overheard Bradley talking to another colleague, dismissing a project I had spent months working on. "James is too comfortable. He's not the one who will take us to the next level," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. Too comfortable? I couldn't believe it. How could he say that about me after everything I had done? It was as if all my contributions didn't matter to him, as if I was invisible. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit back and let him continue to dictate my future. I wasn't going to let him define me. I remember sitting in my office that afternoon, my hands shaking as I scrolled through my phone, my mind racing. I didn't know what the next step would be, but I knew I had to take control. I couldn't wait for Bradley to see my worth. I had to prove it to myself first. So I made a decision. I would show Bradley what hunger looked like, not through empty words, but through actions. I wasn't going to let him push me aside any longer. If he thought I wasn't hungry enough to lead, then I'd show him just how wrong he was. The project that he had dismissed, my project, was the one thing that could turn everything around. It was risky, sure, but if I could pull it off, I knew it would make a difference. It wasn't just about proving Bradley wrong anymore. It was about showing myself that I was capable of more than I had ever imagined. I set my mind on one goal. I would lead this company, with or without Bradley's approval. This wasn't just about getting a promotion anymore. It was about reclaiming my future. And so I got to work. Late nights, early mornings. I poured every ounce of energy into this project, determined to prove that I was more than what Bradley saw in me. I stopped waiting for someone else to notice my worth. I made sure they would. But even as I worked tirelessly, a part of me couldn't shake the thought that I might lose it all. Was I doing the right thing? Could I really lead, or was I just fooling myself? The uncertainty was overwhelming at times, but every time I thought about giving up, Bradley's words would resurface. "You're not hungry enough." And I realized something in that moment. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need his validation. What I needed was to believe in myself again. That was the key. I was hungry, and this time I wasn't going to let anyone stand in my way. The decision hit me like a jolt of electricity, waking me up from the fog of self-doubt I'd been wandering in for days. I couldn't keep letting Bradley's words define me. I couldn't let this moment pass by without doing something about it. It was time to stop sitting on the sidelines and waiting for things to change. If I wanted the future I'd been dreaming about, I had to make it happen myself. I had one shot at this, one chance to show not only Bradley but myself that I was capable of leading. So I made a plan. I spent every spare minute, sometimes late into the night, putting together a proposal that I knew would change everything. This wasn't just about improving sales or meeting expectations. It was about completely rethinking the direction of the company, rebranding it and pushing its boundaries in a way Bradley never could. The project he had dismissed, the one I'd worked on for months, pouring my soul into it, was the one I knew could turn the tide. I'd seen the potential, the opportunities it presented. I knew this could be the breakthrough that would prove I wasn't just a worker bee. I was someone who could drive change, who could lead from the front. It wasn't going to be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever is. I started working in secret, pulling together a team of people I knew I could trust. I couldn't risk anyone finding out what I was doing until I had something concrete. I knew Bradley wouldn't take kindly to this initiative, and I couldn't afford to give him any reason to shut it down before it had a chance to take shape. The hours were long, longer than they'd ever been before. I found myself running on fumes, but it didn't matter. Every time I felt like giving up, I'd think back to Bradley's face, to the way he'd dismissed me so easily. "You're not hungry enough," he had said. And every time those words echoed in my mind, it only fueled me more. I was hungry. Hungry for more than just success. I was hungry for respect, hungry to prove that I belonged at the top. But it wasn't just about proving Bradley wrong. It was about showing myself that I was enough, that I had the drive, the ambition, and the vision to lead, even if the whole world, including Bradley, was telling me I couldn't. I kept the project under wraps, working in the background, taking advantage of every moment of quiet, every moment where I could escape the office and think. My mind was on fire with ideas. Every meeting felt like an opportunity to push my plan forward, to make small changes that would lay the foundation for something bigger. One evening, as I sat in my office staring at the proposal I'd been working on for days, something shifted inside me. I wasn't just doing this to get ahead anymore. I was doing this because I believed in it. I believed in the company's potential. I believed in myself. It wasn't long before I realized that I'd poured my heart and soul into this project, not just as a way to advance, but as a way to take ownership of my future. This was my moment. I was no longer waiting for anyone else's approval. This was my shot, and I was going to take it. I knew there would be risks. Bradley would fight me, maybe even sabotage me if he found out. But I wasn't afraid anymore. This was bigger than anything I'd ever done. It was time to make my move. The next day, I submitted my proposal to the board. I had no idea how they'd react, but I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't keep working in the shadows, hoping that someone would notice my worth. I had to take control of my destiny, and this project was my way to do that. I sat back in my chair, the weight of what I had just done settling in. There was no turning back now. It was out of my hands. The only thing left was to wait and see what would happen. Would they see what I saw in this project? Would they recognize my potential, my hunger to lead? Or would it all blow up in my face? I didn't know. But for the first time in days, I felt something I hadn't felt in a while. Hope. The days after I submitted the proposal felt like an eternity. I kept replaying every moment of the last few weeks, wondering if I had made the right move. Would the board even take me seriously? Would they see the potential I saw, or would Bradley's influence be enough to shut me down before I had a chance? My heart pounded in my chest every time my phone buzzed with an email notification. I couldn't help it. I'd check it constantly, my mind clouded with anticipation and anxiety. The fear of rejection gripped me tightly, but I kept telling myself that I couldn't let it paralyze me. I had to stay focused, to keep pushing forward, no matter what. Then, one afternoon, the call came. It was from the CEO. My hands shook as I picked up the phone, my heart skipping a beat when I heard his voice. He was straightforward, but his words were like a punch to the gut, an overwhelming mixture of disbelief and relief all at once. "James, we've gone over your proposal, and the board is impressed. We've decided to move forward with the project. We believe it has the potential to turn things around for the company." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. For a second, the room seemed to spin, and I had to steady myself. I heard the words, but I couldn't quite process them. This was the moment I had been waiting for, working for, fighting for. They saw what I saw. They believed in it. They believed in me. But the shock didn't stop there. "I also want to let you know that after further discussions, we've decided to make a leadership change," the CEO continued. "We've agreed that you're the right person to lead this project. Bradley will be stepping down, and we'd like you to take over as the new project lead immediately." I could barely catch my breath. I was stunned. The room felt suffocating, my thoughts racing as everything I had worked for, the long nights, the sacrifices, the pain, finally came to fruition. Bradley was gone. And I? I was sitting at the head of the table. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. Bradley, the man who had told me I wasn't hungry enough to lead, was now gone, while I, the one he had dismissed, was being handed the keys to the future. I couldn't contain the wave of emotions that flooded me. It wasn't just the victory, it was the sense of vindication. Every moment I had doubted myself, every time I questioned whether I was enough, had led to this. I had proven it to myself, and now the company had seen it too. But as the weight of the moment settled, I realized something. This wasn't just a win over Bradley, it was a win for me, personally. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. I wasn't chasing someone else's idea of success. I was chasing my own. When I walked into the office later that day, the significance of it all hit me again. The seat that had once been Bradley's, the one he had occupied while dismissing me, was now mine. It wasn't just a chair, it was a symbol of everything I had worked for, every moment I had spent proving that I had what it took. And now it was my turn to lead. As I sat down in that chair, my hands gripping the arms of it, I couldn't help but smile. The journey wasn't over, not by a long shot, but I had crossed a threshold. I had gone from being overlooked to sitting at the table as the person in charge. The hunger that Bradley had thought I lacked, it was finally paying off. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. Leadership never is. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready. Ready to take control of my future. Ready to show the world and myself that I was more than enough. The days following the announcement felt surreal. Every moment seemed to stretch on, as if I were walking in a dream I didn't want to wake up from. But reality had a way of settling in quickly. Yes, I had achieved the promotion. Yes, I had finally proven that I could lead. But this was just the beginning. Now I had to face the consequences of the choices I'd made and the weight of what came next. The first few weeks in my new role were overwhelming. There were so many decisions to be made, so many people to manage, and so much pressure to succeed. I had to prove myself all over again, but this time I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone else. I was proving it to myself. I wasn't going to let the doubts creep back in. But as I sat at the head of the conference table, reviewing the progress of the project I had pushed forward, I couldn't ignore the gnawing truth that had been lingering in the back of my mind. The work that had gotten me here was just the beginning. This new chapter wasn't about reclaiming my place in the company anymore. It was about building something that would leave a lasting impact. It wasn't just about beating Bradley. It was about creating a future that would honor all the sacrifices I had made, the ones that went unnoticed. It was about making sure the company succeeded, not for my personal gain, but because it deserved to, because I had poured everything I had into it. Sarah noticed the change too. In the beginning, I could feel the distance between us growing wider, the long hours, the emotional withdrawal. She had become a part of the life I was constantly pushing aside. But now, with my promotion, something shifted. I didn't have to choose between my career and my relationship. I could finally see a way to have both. One evening, after another long day at the office, I came home to find Sarah sitting on the couch, waiting for me. Her eyes were softer now, no longer filled with that quiet sadness they once held. "You've been different lately," she said, looking at me with a warmth I hadn't seen in a long time. "You're here, James. Really here." I smiled, feeling a rush of relief. Maybe this was the change I needed, I thought. It wasn't just about career success anymore. It was about being present, not just for myself, but for the people I loved. For Sarah. We talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing, about the past, the future, and the lessons we'd both learned. And as I sat there, I realized that the hunger I'd been chasing all this time wasn't just about proving myself to others. It was about finding balance. It was about knowing when to fight and when to let go. In the end, the biggest lesson I took from everything I'd been through was this. Leadership isn't about being the loudest or the most dominant person in the room. It's about understanding your worth, fighting for it and knowing that sometimes you have to be your own biggest advocate. It's about taking the opportunities you're given and making them count, even when you feel like the odds are stacked against you. And most importantly, it's about growth, not just in your career, but in your personal life, in your relationships, and in your sense of self. I'd spent so many years thinking that success meant working myself into the ground. But now I saw that real success, true leadership, was about knowing when to step up, when to make your voice heard, and when to step back and make room for those around you to shine. As I looked out at the company I now had the privilege of leading, I knew I had made the right choice. The journey wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face whatever came next. I wasn't just leading a team, I was leading myself, and that was the most important step of all.